Shooters shoot. But great shooters, well, they make, and keep making shots. The NBA has become a shooter's league. Currently, the Boston Celtics took the most threes in the league at 51 three-point attempts a game. In 2019, it was the Houston Rockets with 45 threes a game, and in 2014, it was the Houston Rockets with 32 threes a game. That's an increase of 8 threes every 5 years. If anyone wants to even touch an NBA court, you have to become a great shooter. But what is a good jump shot? If you go on the internet, you will see a slew of videos teaching the perfect jump shot form. Do you shoot like Dame?
Working on Burks, dancing free, a three, good!
Or Curry? A low gather, or with a high and quick release? Or maybe it's similar to LeBron's, a high gather and an even stronger guide hand. Or maybe you have an even stronger guide hand like Al Horford, clutching the basketball. Or possibly your shot is iconic as Larry Bird's, where you cock the ball back and release. You might just say screw it and shoot like Marcus Camby. Okay, that's a joke. But I could go on and on about the countless variations of jump shots. But my goal here is to find the perfect jump shot, the perfect form. In order to do that, we have to go back, way back. Hold up, not that far back. Right here is good. September 19th, 1891. Nearly 133 years ago, a humble college instructor at Springfield University, West Massachusetts. A man by the name of James Naismith had created a simple game with just a soccer ball and 2 peach baskets. He nor his students understood it then, but their small game would go on to change the world. Shooting of the 1900s was largely impacted by the rules. For starters, a player cannot run with the ball. The player must throw the ball from the spot in which he catches it. Number 8, a player shall score a goal when made when the ball is thrown or batted from the grounds into the basket. Naismith noticed 2 things in his game. Fouls occurred most often in 2 situations: players trying to block the ball and players dribbling the ball. So he put handicaps on his game. First, he raised the basket to 10 feet, requiring players to shoot with an arc shot. This was inspired by his favorite childhood game, Duck on a Rock. Lastly, he limited it to more than 1 dribble. This required players to catch and shoot the ball immediately, and had an impact on shooting forms. Although there is no footage of players in the early days of basketball, I will be inferencing. For starters, they most likely did not have their legs in any athletic position, probably more or less upright with a slight bend in the knees. There was probably no shot pocket, and the players just caught the ball and launched it upwards, trying to get to sink in perfectly with the hoop. College basketball has been around for about 30 years now, and YMCAs across the country now offer space for these 5-on-5 phenomenons. Basketball was introduced to France, UK, Australia, India, and Japan in the span of a couple decades. Players shot with more power from their legs. Although nothing like today's athletic stances, players normally would bring the ball down about knee level and swing the ball upright about eye level, then release it in a flicking motion, asked to put spin on the ball. The ball would take a high arcing path to the hoop. Similar to the 1900 players, maintain the habit of throwing the ball with one hand, occasionally using the opposite hand to guide the basketball. 20 years later, basketball had turned into a business as 2 major leagues came together to form the NBA. Yes, the National Basketball Association. The top team was shooting only 97.7 field goal attempts per game and at a percentage of 31%. Players could now dribble. And since more changes to basketball, laces were removed and seams were created, making a uniform shape, allowing it to be easier bounced. Now players could shoot off the dribble. We enter the jump shot. Players' shots became fluid, as they did not drop the ball below their knees when they caught it. However, from whatever spot they caught it from, they would move the ball up in one motion, releasing it around eye level. The shot you just saw? Well, that was a jump shot. It was revolutionary. Rather than only shooting off a pass, you could create your own space by dribbling. A young man by the name of Kitty Saylor would create the jump shot. The jump shot would take off into every league and gym across the country, improving the efficiency of players. "30 years later, the NBA had become the premier for basketball around the world. The league began to adopt current-day superstars like Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and Bostonian legend Bill Russell. Players began to move the ball in a streamlined motion. This is where we see players develop a shot pocket, an area where they would bring the ball before the shot. After the players brought the ball to the pocket, they would move upward, making their dominant elbow into a right angle, all the way into the release point. Players release the ball at a high release point, mostly above their head. Rather than pushing the ball with two hands, players began placing their non-dominant hand on the side of the ball. They called this the guide hand. Players began using their legs to generate most of the power off the shot, rather than arms, bending in a deeper athletic position. The 60s saw a rise in efficiencies of jump shots from players like Elgin Baylor and Jerry West were able to shoot at high efficiencies. The most efficient team in 1970 had a field goal percentage of 52%, a 20% increase from the following decade. Shooters began to thrive, and shooting forms to become more consistent. Fast forward to the 1980s. Basketball had become more than a simple game. It had become a cult.
Check it out now. I work the pen to make the ink transform on any particular surface.
Larry Bird. Magic Johnson. Michael Jordan. These were the names of the 80s. Basketball became a way of life. People began to study the game, record stats and efficiencies like never before, and forms began to vary drastically. Players did not adopt one form. There were many, and many, and many forms. The only thing that was universally used was the wrist flick. Players began flicking their wrist, adding spin to the ball, giving it more power and accuracy. But this was not the pinnacle of shooting. Commissioner David Stern would draw an arc almost 22 feet away from the basket. This line would change the game forever. It was the Hail Mary of basketball, a high risk for an even higher reward. Players kept shooting it, and shooting it, and shooting it. Three-point attempts going up by 3% each year, and soon it wasn't Hail Mary at all. In 40 years, it had become the only option. I reached out to the best shooters in the game of basketball, and reached out to coaches and players alike. I eventually got a response back from Bob Mckillop, head coach of Davidson's men's basketball for 30 years. During his time, he accumulated 634 wins, 23 conference championships, 10 NCAA appearances. Oh yeah, did I mention he coached Stephen Curry?
Moves against Crawford. 1 second left. He fires it.
Yeah, I think that's enough said.
Shots are going to change, and you have to adapt to the rules of the game. And as we got into the 80s, when the line was created, now all of a sudden people started working on long distance shots, on set plays to get 3-point shots. And eventually it has evolved to a point today, whereas I think, I want to say last night or 2 nights ago, the Celtics numbers, just crazy numbers. And
question to you is, do you believe there's like a overall perfect jump shot, like a perfect form all players should follow?
That's an interesting question, because I don't know that all guys have a bodily makeup. Now they're physiologically built to have the same format on their jump shot. Example being, we have several players at Davidson over the years who couldn't shoot at all. They were very poor, and no matter how much they tried, their body mechanics were not the problem. It was the way, the strength of their arms or their shoulders or their elbow or their forearms or their wrists. They could never get it into that smooth and rhythmic movement.
What do you believe makes a great shooter?
I tell Stephen this all the time. It was told to me by a former NBA player and coach named Kevin Lockery. He's a legendary player. And this is what he told me as I was developing. He said, you must be willing to sleep in the streets. What that means is you have to be willing to go out at night and get locked out of the house if you want to be a great shooter. So you must be willing to sleep in the streets. You must be willing to risk and have no fear.
Well, let's look like we have our answer. You must be willing to sleep in the streets. It is important that we look at basketball shots not as a rigid routine, but as a fluid art that changes and depends on the player, so that we all may find the best shooting form for ourselves and learn to love the game. Thank you.